Picture this, because I still can't believe it sometimes. I'm standing in front of the same weathered farmhouse my great-grandfather built, and all around me, in every direction, are 135 identical suburban boxes, shoulder to shoulder, like someone tried to copy-paste a brochure over my life. One ranch house in the middle of a plastic paradise. I'm Colton Hayes, fourth-generation cattle rancher on 847 acres my great-grandfather Henry Hayes carved out in 1889 in what's now called Redwood County. To me, it's not acreage. It's birthdays under the old oak, calloused hands on fence posts, and the little earthen dam my granddad built to tame the creek that runs through our valley. My wife, Dr. Lily Hayes, understood this land better than anyone. She was an environmental scientist, PhD and all, who wrote her thesis on our watershed. She mapped every spring, every floodplain, every place water liked to rest before moving on. 18 months ago, cancer took her, and it almost took me with her. Our daughter, Olivia Hayes, calls from her tech job in Seattle every Sunday, telling me, "Dad, it's just land, sell, and move closer." She doesn't get that this place is her mother's fingerprint on the earth. 2 years back, my neighbor Walter Briggs died, and his kids sold 640 acres to Summit Crest Development for a few $1,000,000. Within months, their survey accidentally slid 200 feet onto my side of the line. By the time I caught it, they were already building Silver Ridge Meadows, a shiny new subdivision, and their showpiece HOA clubhouse, playground, and main road were all sitting squarely on my property, drinking from my springs like I didn't exist. Then, one afternoon, a white Tesla glides up my dirt driveway, splashing mud like it's offended. Out steps Melanie Carrington, president of the Silver Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association, in spotless heels that sink straight into my pasture like justice. Behind her is a sheriff's deputy trying very hard not to look embarrassed. "This is a family neighborhood now," she announces, waving an eviction notice at me on my own front lawn. "We need to remove this non-conforming agricultural structure." Non-conforming. She meant my house, my barn, my life. "Ma'am," I told her, gripping the porch rail my grandfather built. "My family was here before your marketing brochure had a zip code." Her smile froze. That was the first shot. The next morning, my mailbox exploded with 47 violation notices, courtesy of her HOA and a suddenly very interested county code office. Livestock odor. Unsightly barns. Fence height, obstructing community cohesion. On an actual working ranch. Each fine, $500 per day. County Inspector Daniel Mercer showed up at dawn with a clipboard and the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He measured my fence posts down to fractions while my rooster, Rusty, tried to peck the pin out of his hand every time the measurements got particularly ridiculous. "Sorry, Colton," he muttered, diesel fumes mixing with the smell of my coffee. "Mrs. Carrington wants everything documented to the quarter inch. Do the math. $23,500 per day until I turned a century-old ranch into a Pinterest board. That's not regulation. That's economic strangulation." That night, I sat on the porch where Lily and I used to plan retirement trips we'll never take, staring at the glow of 135 illegal houses and the dark outline of our dam. The wind carried the scent of her honeysuckle garden and the distant yelps of coyotes. They hadn't just pushed a boundary. They'd declared war. So I hired a soldier. Enter Grant Lawson, ex-Marine turned property attorney, broad shoulders, buzz cut, and the kind of smile you only see when a man smells blood, legal blood. He spread old survey maps and new plats all over my kitchen table like battle plans. "Colton," he said, tapping the lines. "They didn't just stretch the boundary. They built their clubhouse, main road, and water infrastructure on your land, without wetland permits, without environmental studies, and using your reservoir. That's not a mistake. That's a felony buffet. We brought in ground-penetrating radar. Underneath the shiny HOA clubhouse, buried in concrete like a confession, were my grandfather's original boundary markers from 1962. Silver Ridge Meadows was literally anchored in stolen soil. We filed a federal lawsuit, civil rights violations, water theft, environmental crimes. And that's when the ghost of my wife walked back into the story. Stress will hollow you out from the inside. I found that out the hard way when chest pain dropped me to my knees in the middle of feeding the cattle. Sirens, antiseptic, bright hospital lights. Then Dr. Laura Bennett standing over me in the ER, telling me my blood pressure could power Christmas lights. "Whatever battle you're in, Mr. Hayes," she said, "it's not worth dying for." I looked at her and thought, you've never seen someone try to erase your whole family with a zoning map. While I recovered, Melanie escalated. Anonymous reports to animal control. Sudden environmental concerns about my cattle. Fake complaints to child services even though I don't have minor kids. Property taxes tripled overnight when my land was reclassified as commercial. Then came the low blow. Mechanics liens from Summit Crest Development, billing me $89,000 for drainage improvements they'd installed on my stolen land. Grant read the papers and laughed so hard he nearly woke Rusty. "This is like a plumber breaking into your house, ripping out good pipes, then sending you an invoice. Courts hate this. They just handed us a gift." But the real turning point didn't come from court. It came from a cardboard box in my attic. I was going through Lily's old research one night. The house quiet except for the rain tapping on the roof and Rusty muttering in his sleep when I found her master's thesis. Watershed Management and Flood Control in Rural Communities, a case study of Redwood County. She had drawn our valley in meticulous detail: dam, springs, underground aquifers, overflow paths. In the margins, in her neat handwriting, she'd written, "Natural floodplain extends 2.3 miles downstream in 50-year storms. Proposed residential development here would sit under 3 feet of water in major events if upstream agriculture stops managing flow." My heart pounded as I read. Lily had predicted, decades ago, that if anyone tried to pave this valley and ignore the floodplain, the water would come back to collect its debt. I called Grant at midnight. "Do you realize what you're holding?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharp, awake. "Your wife documented federal crimes before they happened. They built 135 houses in a protected flood zone, hid the data, took conservation grants, and then tried to evict the guy whose dam keeps them dry." We pulled together a war council in my kitchen. First through the door was Dr. Margaret Cole, retired environmental science teacher, the type of woman who could silence a classroom with one eyebrow. She read Lily's thesis, lips moving over the equations like a prayer. "This is flawless," she whispered. "I'd use this as a textbook." Next came Jack Navarro, Army Corps veteran whose truck sounded like it had stormed Normandy. He studied my grandfather's dam specs and nodded with professional respect. "Your granddad built this right. These brass valves can do controlled releases like a charm, if you know what you're doing." Then Emily Park, civil engineer, laptop under one arm, 2 coffee cups in the other, the embodiment of an exhausted working mom with no time for HOA nonsense. She ran new models on Lily's data. "If natural flood patterns resume," she said, spinning her laptop around, "this whole subdivision sits in temporary wetlands. Not enough to knock houses over, but enough to make them unlivable. We're talking 3 feet of standing water in a big storm." 3 people the HOA had harassed. Margaret fined for wildflowers. Jack threatened over his American flag. Emily warned about her kids' sidewalk chalk. Now sitting at my table, planning how to defend the land they'd all fallen in love with. Grant laid out the legal frame: Clean Water Act violations, fraudulent disclosure, federal grant fraud. Rachel Monroe, an investigative journalist, agreed to dig into Summit Crest Development's funding. She soon uncovered that they'd taken millions in federal money earmarked for agricultural preservation and then used it to pave the very wetlands they were paid to protect. Meanwhile, Melanie was losing her grip. She weaponized social services with fake mental health complaints, so the sheriff and a county psychiatrist showed up for a welfare check. They sat at my kitchen table, reviewing a file full of photos, me talking to my cattle, tending Lily's garden, keeping her picture on the mantle. 30 minutes later, the psychiatrist closed the folder and said, "Mr. Hayes is grieving, not unstable. However, the pattern of harassment from Mrs. Carrington is concerning. Imagine trying to lock someone up for talking to his cows and accidentally getting yourself flagged instead." Rusty almost crowed with laughter. "We documented everything: false reports, damaged fences, accidental hits to my water lines by her landscaping crews. We folded it all into the federal case." Then the weather forecast changed. For the first time in 3 years, a massive Pacific storm system was headed straight for our valley. The National Weather Service used words that make old ranchers look up from their coffee: enhanced risk, major rainfall event. Margaret flipped through decades of weather records. We're overdue, she said quietly. Every 15 to 20 years, this valley reminds people who's actually in charge. Your wife was right. This is the one. Jack walked me through the dam controls like a drill sergeant wargaming an operation. Emily modeled flows, timing, safe release rates. We weren't planning an attack. We were planning to stop pretending we could hold back a river forever. And up the hill, in the illegally built clubhouse sitting on my stolen land, Melanie scheduled an emergency meeting to label me an environmental terrorist. The timing could not have been more perfect. Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. The sky over Silver Ridge Meadows hangs low and heavy, the air electric, like the whole valley is holding its breath. By 1:30, the HOA clubhouse, built right on top of my grandfather's boundary markers, is packed with homeowners. Grills smoking, kids running through puddles, people arguing about property values, while the real danger is falling from the sky. From my kitchen window, I can see Melanie pacing in front of a projector screen labeled Environmental Terrorism, protecting our families from agricultural extremists. She means me, the guy whose dam has kept their basements dry for 60 years. At 2:05, with rain drumming harder on the roof, Grant and I step into the clubhouse. Our boots leave honest mud on their pristine floor. The room goes quiet except for the storm. Afternoon, I say, water dripping from my hat. Since you're all meeting on my property again, I figured you deserve to know what's about to happen. From the back, Dr. Margaret Cole stands, holding Lily's maps like evidence in a murder trial. Before we talk terrorism, she says, voice calm but sharp, you should know this entire subdivision sits in a federally protected floodplain. These studies were done decades ago, then buried. Emily plugs her laptop into the projector, replacing Melanie's slideshow with rainfall radar and flood models. Blue and green blobs marching straight toward us, little digital animations of what Lily already knew. You were never supposed to build here, Emily tells them. The only reason you haven't flooded already is because this man's family has been managing water upstream for generations. Grant lays it out, federal conservation money stolen, environmental reports hidden, homeowners misled about flood risk. That's when Melanie loses it. He's manipulating the water, she screams, jabbing a finger at me. He's weaponizing the dam to destroy our community. Ma'am, I say, trying not to laugh at the idea I control the weather. The only thing I've been doing is cleaning your mess before nature notices. Then phones start buzzing. Push notifications. News flashes. Rachel Monroe's expose goes live. How a developer and an HOA turned a protected valley into a fraud zone. Minutes later, another alert. Federal marshals raiding Summit Crest development. Outside, the rain shifts from nice for the lawn to Old Testament. Water pours off gutters, pools around the clubhouse foundation. The fire alarm shrieks as water seeps into electrical systems that were never designed for a flood zone because they were never supposed to be built in one. People bolt for the exits, shoes splashing in rising water. In the parking lot, Margaret, Jack, and Emily find me. Colton, Emily shouts over the storm. If that dam fills all the way, how long before nature makes the choice for you? Radar says 6 inches in the next 4 hours, Jack adds, checking his phone. You can let it out slow now, or the valley will do it fast later. Margaret grips my arm. What would Lily tell you to do? I look at the houses that tried to erase my history, the people who helped hurt me, and the handful who chose to stand with me anyway. I also see my grandfather's dam and my wife's handwriting in the margins of her research. She'd tell me nature doesn't negotiate, I say quietly, but she gives warnings. This is one of them. By 9:15 p.m., the storm is in full fury, the kind that makes you feel small no matter how important you think you are. I stand at the dam controls, brass levers warm under my hands from generations of use, 200 people watching from higher ground like a jury. I open the valves. Slowly, deliberately. No drama, no vengeance, just physics and gravity, and a man finally stepping out of nature's way. Water pours through the spillways, then down the valley, following the paths Lily mapped decades earlier. Jack calls and updates. Flows steady, no surge, no collapsing banks. Emily relays evacuation instructions over emergency channels. News helicopters hover above the storm, spotlights cutting through rain as 135 luxury homes begin to sit in 3 feet of cold honest water. My farmhouse, built on the high ground my great-grandfather chose for a reason, stays dry. Sheriff Luis Vega arrives, takes one look, and announces to every camera, no laws are being broken. Mr. Hayes is operating his own, long-permitted water infrastructure. If you have concerns, call your insurance and your real estate lawyers. Reporters swarm me on the dam. One shoves a mic in my face. Sir, what do you say to people claiming you destroyed this community? I look straight into the lens, rain running off the brim of my hat. I didn't destroy anything, I say. I just stopped holding back what was always coming. The people who built in a floodplain and lied about it, that's who you should talk to. Another asks if I feel guilty about the damage. My wife spent 4 years warning about this. I answer, you're not watching a villain at work. You're watching delayed consequences. Downstream, Agent Naomi Brooks from the FBI announces arrests for fraud and conspiracy, standing knee-deep in the water that proves her case. Later, Judge Ellen Chambers will send Melanie to federal prison, and her husband, Councilman Dean Carrington, along with Summit Crest execs, will follow. Legal scholars will nickname the precedent the Hayes Principle, protecting agricultural water rights in a dozen states. 6 months later, the valley doesn't look like a failed suburb. It looks like a miracle. Most homeowners took their insurance payouts and left. 46 stayed and helped us turn the flooded subdivision into the Lily Hayes Wetland Preserve and Learning Center, using grant money that actually went to conservation this time. Emily runs youth programs. Jack teaches old-school water management. Dr. Margaret Cole moved into the farmhouse with me, her laughter echoing off the same walls where grief once lived alone. Olivia came home from Seattle, bringing her coding skills and her mother's stubborn heart. Together, we built a scholarship fund in Lily's name for students studying wetlands and sustainable development. Birds returned, water cleared, native plants came back like they'd just been waiting for us to shut up and listen. Every spring, we host a festival. Kids splash in clean streams that once fed a fraudulent subdivision. Parents sit in workshops learning about water law, floodplains, and how to tell when someone's trying to sell them a house in the path of a storm. Rusty struts around wearing a tiny tour guide badge, living his best life. Sometimes, I sit on the porch at sunrise, coffee in hand, watching the light spill across the restored wetlands. The pain of what they tried to do still lives somewhere in my chest, but so does the knowledge that we turned their greed into something holy. Our fight was never just about land or even revenge. It was about proving that truth, persistence, and respect for the way the world actually works can still beat money, lies, and cheap siding. That's my story. Now I want to hear yours. If an HOA, a developer, or anyone with a title tried to bully you off what's rightfully yours, were they defending community standards or just protecting their wallet? Where do you draw the line between justice, revenge, and letting nature, finally, take its course?